Waiting. We apologize for being a little bit late, but I'd like to welcome everybody to the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board meeting. This is a regular meeting, June 23rd. Time is 2:20 p.m. and I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Mrs. Hartley, can you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call beginning with Mrs. Kirby, please.
Pam Kirby. Kim Hartman. Barbara Perleberg.
Bonnie Sneed, and telephonically?
George Jackson.
George Jackson. Thank you. All members are present. First, we'll have a public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2015-16 expenditure budget and truth in taxation notice. As required, we will have a separate public comment on the 15-16 expenditure budget. Were any cards received? Did we receive any cards? Did you turn? I have one card. Oh, did I put him in here? I'm sorry. I have one. Francesca Thomas. Did you say there were two?
Good afternoon, President Sneed, members of the board, Dr. Peterson, and not Sandra, Lisa. I am here to reiterate a previous email that I have sent you attesting to the work of the Budget Committee on forming the budget that you're voting on today. As a member of that Budget Committee, I am proud to have been a part of the community input that helped guide the district's decision making. A wide variety of stakeholders, parents, teachers, administrators, community members, and staff met on multiple occasions and managed to get 2/3 consensus on each of the proposed cuts in the budget you see today. The proposed budget is reflective of the promises made in the override campaign, and it aligns to the mission of our school organization by placing 69.3% of all dollars into the classroom. As stewards of this district, I ask you to rely on the community's input and the advice of your district experts with regard to this budget. Please recognize the hard work that has gone into drafting this budget. Acknowledge with your yes vote the alignment of this budget to both the district's stated mission and the promises made in the override campaign. And do your best to promote and explain all this to our community as ambassadors of the Scottsdale Unified School District. Thank you for all you do for our children, for our teachers, for our district, and for our community.
Thank you. Having no other comment cards submitted, the next item is the actual action item and discussion of the adoption of proposed fiscal year 2015-16 expenditure budget.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Our CFO, Dan O'Brien, will be presenting our proposed budget for adoption this afternoon. We have added some slides to our presentation, I think, that helps clearly identify, and I'd like to thank the input from our board members of helping us to get to that point so that our public can really understand what our budget means. And so I'll turn it over to Danny.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam President, board members, Dr. Peterson, and not Sandra, Lisa. This afternoon, we will be, I'll give you a brief overview of the proposed budget for adoption. As Dr. Peterson had mentioned, through some input from board members and some discussions that we've had, this is probably a little bit of a different looking presentation than we're all used to, but I think it adds a lot of information to the budget, and hopefully will help with the community and everybody understanding the budget. So first is just a quick summary. This is on page 1 of the budget. It's the 3 funds that the state kind of puts as the major funds. So we have our maintenance and operations budget of just under $147 million. Excuse me. we have our district additional assistance, also known as unrestricted capital, of just over $10 million. And one thing I want to point out here in this one is the $10 million has our capital override in it. And as we've talked many times, the capital override, the revenue that we receive from the capital override, we won't get next year. So the capital override has passed its 7 years, so we will no longer receive revenue from it. But we do have dollars that are carrying over. So as we've presented to the board, and I know Dr. Benson several months ago talked about the instructional aid, and we've talked about technology. We've had some plans in place to carry over some dollars so that we can purchase some of those things over the next year or two until we can get another capital override passed, or hopefully maybe the state can continue to bring back capital that they've cut throughout the years. Remembering that we've had adjustments by the state to be able to support and balance their budget, and with the over $3 million cut for fiscal year 16, we only will get about 15% that we are budgeted for capital, because the state takes the rest to balance their budget. So really getting hurt on that capital money. And then we have our federal grants of just under $13 million. As I spoke about 2 weeks ago, remember that most of our federal grants are on the federal fiscal cycle, and their fiscal cycle doesn't end until September 30th. So these are real estimates and projected, and in the December revision, we will have a more accurate allocation, exactly what our allocation is, and then what the carryover is. So there'll be some adjustments, just like previous years. So we'll have a total proposed budget of just under $170 million. This slide is one of the slides we added that just kind of gives a little simple overview and the statute and how the statute works for building the M&O budget. Remembering that even though we have all of our funds in the budget here and we submit the entire budget to the state, really the M&O budget and capital are really the ones that are formula driven by the state. Our other funds, like federal grants and state grants, are done on an allocation, and a lot of our 500 funds, textbooks, extracurricular tax credit, and those, food service, are done off of revenue that we receive from taxpayers or from donors. So we have our M&O budget, which is really made up of a couple different sections, and we'll go into a little bit of detail next to them. We have our base support level. We add in our transportation revenue control limit. We add district additional assistance. As I've mentioned many times, Scottsdale takes the allocation we do get from the state, the small amount that we do, and puts a large portion of it into our M&O budget. And then we do have, you have the ability to add growth if we do. That's usually done in May if you have growth. And then we have some other additions, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about what those are in a minute. So just a quick little summary of what we do. This is the revenue control limit, and it is very important. So we take the transportation control limit and we add it onto the base support level, which then gets our revenue control limit, or the RCL. And this is a real simple way to do it. It takes about 9 pages inside the worksheets to do this, but a real simple look at it is we take our total weighted student count. So that is our regular ed students, our special ed students, and then our online students. We add the weights to them. Special ed gets a lot of weights. We've talked about that a lot, and some regular ed students get a little bit of weight. And then we multiply it by the base level amount. And I want to stop here a little bit and explain kind of the base level amount. If you remember from some of the conversations in the spring and our proposed budget last 2 weeks ago, the base support level actually has 2 numbers in it. It has the regular base support level, which we got our 1.59% inflation on there. And then if you remember, Governor Ducey in the legislature in the state budget gave us what they're calling additional inflation. And they put it on a very separate line item, which was about $54. To be able to keep this on one slide, I just combined those two into that base support level. So it's made up of 2 numbers. We then have our teacher experience index. Again, that went down slightly this year. We have our audit services. We get reimbursed for our external audit services by the state. This is prior year's audit services, so we kind of get caught up in the rears, just like a lot of our budget is done in the prior year. We add all those together to get our base revenue control limit of just under $113 million. We then add in our transportation of $8.1 million, which gets us our revenue control limit of just over $121 million. And that's important because our revenue control limit is what is used to base our overrides off of, our M&O override. So it's an important piece within the formula. From our revenue control limit, we then add in our special override, or what we call our 15% M&O override. So we add those dollars into it. We then add in the dollars from the district additional assistance that we have moved from the capital over to the M&O. And then we have some of these other budgets. And although it looks like a large amount of money, the major two items in there are desegregation and our budget balance carry forward. There's some smaller numbers in there of some tuition we receive from out of state, some dropout prevention money we receive from the state, but the main items in there are your desegregation and your budget balance carry forward. When we add all those together, we get our general budget limit, or what we always talk about is our M&O budget, of just under $147 million. So that's just a real quick 2 slides, kind of what we've been working on for the past 6 months. Everybody recognizes this chart. This is the dollars in the classroom, or what we talk about is the AG report. So we've taken and shown this very similar to what we did and proposed, but we also did add per board members' request. We added some numbers for fiscal year 15 and 16. And what we want to point out here, though, is when you look at fiscal year 14, that year's over. Year's done. Auditor General has already sent out the one sheet, the pie chart as I call it. So those are known numbers. Our fiscal year 16 are just projection. Even though we're getting towards the end of the year, we still have bills that we're paying, and we're going to pay them well into August. And so this is what our year-to-date expenditures are, plus encumbrances, or what we believe is left on a PO that might come in. So as the invoices come in, we'll continue to pay those out. So it's a little bit of a projection, a little bit of an estimate, not exact known numbers yet, as the fiscal year isn't closed. And then we have the fiscal year 16 budget. And as I mentioned at the proposed meeting, looking even at the projection versus the budget, this is kind of apples to oranges. We're taking actual expenditures in 14, measuring them against projections, and then we've got a budget number, which aren't really expenses. They're what we're budgeting in those funds. So it's a little bit of an apples to oranges. But it is a good comparison, and it's a good thing for us to look at. And then again at the bottom, as I mentioned before, the 69.3, the 67, that is during the budget cycle for the state governor kind of came up with a new way that they allocate for dollars in the classroom, and they took the classroom line, the instructional support line, and then the student support, and they combined those threes to get what they call dollars in the classroom. It's a new formula. It's done on page 1. We have to now show it to the state because I believe they'll use that. But it's not, again, it's not what the AG uses. The AG has told us and has talked about they're still going to use their same formula. So a little bit of differences between the two agencies. And again, this is reminding that this is all funds. So when we look at the budget for fiscal year 16, we see 193 million, and I just talked about 170 million. Those are two different numbers because this includes everything. So it starts pulling in community ed, food service, auxiliary funds, extracurricular tax credit, textbook dollars, lost textbook dollars, all those funds that go into this. So this is just a little bit of a summary of change. We've broken this out into 2. So we took the state dollars in the classroom, kind of that new formula, those 3 categories, and we've put it up there, and we can see that we've gone from 68 to 69%. In just a minute, we'll get into a little bit more detail of exactly what some of those changes are and the major changes. But a few things to point out real quick of the differences. We did decrease in ADM. So even though we've decreased, and we do get paid per ADM on the base support level, you can see we've still getting money into those important classifications that get the dollars to the classroom. So you can see there that, again, even though we've decreased ADM, we have increased the dollars per ADM. A lot to do with our override. We're getting a very big influx of dollars with our override. And so we've increased it 17% or 14% over the prior year. These are kind of what I'm calling the dollars outside the classroom, or the other categories. We have up there administration, food service, plant operations, and transportation. And just a few items, reduction in administration. So as you'll see and as we'll talk, we've added 7 assistant principals and 1 principal, remembering that even those are site, and a lot of people don't believe they're administration. When you code them in the pie chart for the Auditor General, they're considered administration. Not only those, but also all that office staff that's up front that we love to see in the schools. Those are administration because they're considered part of the principal's office. But we've also reduced FTE in administration in other departments. So again, even though we've increased some for those important pieces at the elementary schools and some at the high schools for those assistant principals and another principal, we've done some other reductions in efficiencies in other departments to make sure that we're trying to get as many dollars into the classroom in the site that we can. Food service did have an increase. Most of this is due to carryover. Some of it is due to salary, the 2% increase in salaries. But we have increased our catering business, what we call our outside revenue. We're doing a lot more catering to Head Start programs and other programs. We're also doing the food service or the summer program where we're feeding some students during the summer. And so we do have some increased revenue there that we are carrying over. And we are looking for a couple reasons. One is, and I'll mention in a minute, just kind of some operating costs, and then also looking to purchase some new equipment and stuff to make sure that department continues to function. Plant operations stayed almost flat. We did have a decrease in FTE, but we also have an increase in the salaries, the 2%, and then utilities. We all know utilities go up. They go up every year, it seems like. So we do have that, and then we have some fund carryover and some various funds for plant operation. Transportation did have an increase, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The main areas are for the salary increase and for fuel cost. Again, as I spoke earlier, just remembering that we're doing actuals to projected to budgeted, so it's not quite all the exact dollars. We do have budgeted carryover in many funds that we might not use. So in grants, again, as I spoke earlier, we have carryover money. It looks like carryover money, but remember, federal grants go until September 30th. So we have all that money that we have to spend in July, August, and September. So even though it kind of looks like carryover, it's really already budgeted to spend, but since this budget today is different than our federal budget, we have to have those. We also have some textbook fees for lost textbooks. We have rental dollars. Our sites that get the rental dollars, some of our building services that get rental dollars, roll some monies over so they make sure they have some. And obviously extracurricular tax credit always has a lot of money that rolls over from year to year. So we do have some money. We budget for them. On the forms, we have to put the budget on there so that it goes to the state and so the state can see it and have it for record, but we might not always use them all. So just a little bit, this is a larger graph. We will have some detailed graphs here in just a minute, but this is just kind of the summary of some of the budget changes. You can see there that we have fiscal year 15. You can see in the light yellow there is our M&O override. That is one of our biggest areas that has the increase. Obviously, with the influx of the money, we have increases in some of these departments. Most of it is in the classroom, you can see there. Lower class sizes by 3, specials, band, strings, raises for teachers. You can see it there. We do have some of it in the other areas because we do have raises across the board for all employees. So a little bit here, some information on each of the categories. And this is looking at, again, a little bit of a different chart that we've used to seeing, but I think it's a very good chart from input from our board members and discussion of kind of showing exactly what some of the major categories are of the change. We have our M&O override. Again, obviously, our reducing class size by 3, specials, band, strings. And then we have our budget cuts. And again, we'll see the budget cuts there, and most of all these budget cuts here are the budget cuts that we've been discussing over the spring, and they're the cuts that we have done because of the district additional assistance. And I point that out because new statute states that we have to have a public meeting to hold and tell the public where we're reducing from our district additional assistance. Now, we are an A district, so we didn't have to have one 30 days before the adoption of the budget. Because we are an A district, we can do it at the same time that we adopt the budget, so we're doing it here. So we have pointed this out, so we do show the public per statute exactly where the budget cuts were coming for our district additional assistance. And then we have some abbreviations there. We have our classroom site fund. so our Prop 301. And then we have our Indian gaming funds. Most of those increases, again, as I talked about, are some carryover funds that could or could not be spent. We don't lose them if we don't spend them. They will carry over. They don't revert back anywhere. They are dollars that we have. But sometimes we budget the carryover but might not use them. And one of the best examples for the Classroom Site Fund is our SIP payment, or what we call our performance payment, Fund 012. Those dollars sit there and carry over because we don't have our performance plans completed and all the data back for HR to complete that until the summertime, so we don't pay that out in August. So even though the money looks like it's carrying over, it gets paid out immediately to our teachers when they come back first thing. The next one is grants. That's our Title I, Title II, all the grant funds. We talked a little bit about that again. We have those 3 months that we still have to pay. So in this budget, it's rolling over. In their budget and in the fiscal budget, it doesn't look like it's rolling over. So it's just because of that timing a little bit. And then there's some carryover too. A lot of our funds, Title I, Title II, IDEA, have carryover funds from year to year. They are dwindling as we go, mainly due to the fact that they're being used up because our allocations for those grants are going down. They've been going down over the past several years, and so they continue to go down. And then we have the other funds. Although it looks like a large number, again, some of that is carryover. Other funds are what we talk about our 500 funds, so they're extracurricular tax credit. So if we have sites that have, and we have many sites, probably almost all of our schools, that have money that just rolls over because they didn't spend it, or they got it early in the year for a trip that band or football might be taking in the fall. So it's just rollover funds that they haven't spent. Another area is gift funds. Schools get a lot of gifts for various reasons, sometimes very restrictive, sometimes not. So on some of those restrictive grants, they might not spend it all in 1 year, so it rolls over to the next year. Again, rollover, we might spend, we might not spend, but we have to budget for it because we have to put it on the budget forms that we send to the state so that they can see it. And so then when we add all those together, we get our new budgeted amount for fiscal year 16, which is just over $106 million. Instructional support is the next section, and a lot of this has to do with sites. It gets the guidance counselors, some OTs, PTs. That's kind of the category it is, just to kind of remind everybody what the categories are. Again, we see there a large increase for M&O, our maintenance and operation, our override. We do have our budget cuts where we did cut some in some of the other some of the departments, reductions. Classroom site fund, we do have some personnel that are able to get classroom site funds. Indian gaming funds, we use some of that to do professional development and support for teachers, so we have some of those dollars. The grants look really big there again, but again, this kind of goes to that talk about the next 3 months we've got to pay for. A lot of our federal grants don't pay for teachers. Our Title I, our Title II, professional development, IDEA, they're really federal grants for support, and this is where a large portion of them is in the instructional support, professional development, OTs, PTs, those kinds of things. So although that box looks really big, and it's, well, wow, there's a lot of money out there, a lot of it is to be used to pay for the next 3 months as those close out in September 30th. And then we have the other funds. We do have some dollars in those other funds, those rental dollars, those textbook fees, the extracurricular tax credit that we do use for some instructional support. Student support, the easiest one on this one is librarians. So our librarians sit here. So again, we have our M&O. Again, most of this is just the 2% raise. Our reducing class size by 3 specials and everything is in the class size, in the classroom area. We have our budget cuts, which is a little bit of reduction in some areas. And then a small amount, librarians get a little bit of our classroom site fund. So there's some small increases there that for that payment we're going to make, and that kind of that carryover money that then we'll pay out in August. And then we have some grants and some other funds that are very small. Administration, always a good one to talk about. Always a hot topic. Again, we see there our M&O override, again, mainly the 2% override. But it's large here because, as I mentioned earlier in the program, this is where our 7 assistant principals and our principals sit. So again, we don't think of them as administration. A lot of people don't think of them as administration. But this is where the Auditor General categorizes them. So they are in here. So although that number looks large, we're not spending dollars on administration. We're not spending our M&O dollars on administration. This is site dollars. There is some for administration because we do have our 2% raises, but it's those principals mainly that are in there. And then we do have some budget cuts. So we did cut some directors, some administration, some other positions that are coded here. We had some HR reductions in some other departments. And then we do have some other funds. We do use a small amount of funds just to do a few things, so we have some carryover there that could be sitting there. So although administration did go up, a good chunk of it is our site administration, which is good, because those 7 assistant principals and those principals are important to those communities, are important to those schools. And as Dave and Mitch sit back there, they'll be shaking their head that those are important out there to our community. Thumbs up, got it. Our plant operation is next. You can see there that we had a slight decrease, or projected budgeted slight decrease. Again, we have our M&O budget, but then we also had budget cuts. So as we went through, we talked about these, the custodians, the landscapers, the grounds crews, a carpenter. We had those cuts that we had in building services. And then in the other funds, a lot of this is rental dollars. So building services does get some rental dollars. When we get rental dollars, one, we get rental dollars for utilities. Utilities is paid out of plant operations, building services. That's where it has to be coded. But then we also get some money from the rental dollars that we give to building services, so that when the school calls and says, I need something fixed, whether it's because of a renter or just because of normal wear and tear, that we can use those funds to pay for those. So there are some repair monies in there. Transportation. Transportation, again, has a slight increase. Again, this is a budgeted increase. We do have our M&O override, our 2% increase. We did have some budget cuts. We did reduce some staff for some efficiencies. We have a small amount of grants. Most of this here is not that necessarily transportation gets a grant, but there's a lot of grants, Title I, 21st Century, that pay transportation to transport their kids. So it's not that transportation is getting a grant, it's that some of those grants are being used to pay for transportation costs. And then we have other funds, and most of our other funds here is transportation does, at the same time as they generate revenue in our Medicare program, they also get some of that revenue to help offset some of those costs. So there is some Medicare and MIPS. And again, when I talk about a slight increase and a budgeted increase, we do have obviously an increase because of the 2%, but we also have, as we're all seeing while we're driving around, we see gas prices going up. And even though we pay wholesale prices, which is a little bit lower than what you pay at the pump, you can see them gradually going up. And in talking to a lot of the people, we are seeing those go up. So we have budgeted some dollars to make sure that we have there. And then we also have some repairs. As buses, is just our personal cars break down, we have buses that break down too, and as we need to do that, we have to prepare for that. So we have some of those dollars to make sure that we can keep our buses up and running. Food service. As you can see here, not too many bars here. Food service, as I've mentioned many of times, is a self-funded program. So food service does not, except for a very small amount that's required by law, does not take any money out of M&O. So they are self-funded. So when you see the 2% up there, that is not M&O dollars. That is their own fund dollars, their own revenue that pay for that 2%. So we are not using the food service or M&O dollars to pay for food service increases. They're paying for it out of their own dollars. And then as I mentioned earlier, we have seen some catering going forward. We have seen some increased revenue. We'll see more increased revenue next year. But one of the also things that we do for carry forward is we always carry anywhere between 2 and 3 months worth of operating cash. And we do that on purpose. Our dollars that come in for food service, which is a good portion of our federal money, those reimbursements don't start until September and October. Well, we start in August. We have people that come back in July. We start buying food. So we do carry over some funds, both in carryover and cash, to be able to operate for those 3 months until we start getting some of that reimbursement back. So it's to make sure that that operation continues on and continues on prosperous through the year. And then as always, as I've mentioned, use every possible moment to celebrate November of 2014 when our voters passed our override. I want to thank all the voters, all the parents, all the teachers, everybody who supported that. And so just as a little celebration towards the end of my presentation, because we always want to celebrate, just a little breakout of where this override funding is going. so that our community can see it and know that we're spending it as we promised. So we have approximately 89% going to the classroom. Obviously, we know those major categories: reduction in class size, specials, bands, strings, and then we have our raises too. Administration, as I've mentioned several times throughout this presentation, although 6% looks quite high, please remember, assistant principals, 7 assistant principals, 5 at the elementary, 2 at the high school, and a principal. So a lot of those dollars, a lot of that 6% is not going to what we all think is administration. It's not going to outside of the school. It's going down in the schools with some of those departments. There is some raises for administrations, but again, it's a majority of those assistant principals and principals. We have plant operations, we have instructional support, student support, and then transportation. Again, when we take in some of this instructional support and student support, again, our nurses, our librarians, our aides, our counselors, our OTs, our PTs, we take in our classroom dollars and we take in even those principals. You can see there we have over 90% of our M&O override funding. Over 90% of it is going to the school or the site, just as we told our taxpayers we would do. And then this afternoon, we are requesting that the governing board approve the fiscal year 16 proposed budget. Again, a quick summary of what it states on page 1. We have that budget, M&O, district additional assistance, and federal grants of just under $170 million. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Other questions first before me? Okay.
Do you have public comment or no?
Oh, we had that.
Oh, well, I thought there was a specific one. Sorry.
It's any board member discussion. Any questions? Okay. Danny, and first of all, I want to thank you for the hours that you've spent. We can count you as one of our teachers because between the budget committee over a number of years and board members, you've been very patient with us. I'm sure you've had to answer the same question to the same person more than once. Just a couple things that I wanted to clarify. If we go back to your overall chart, the one that had said dollars in the classroom, all funds.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It was, yeah, right. Can you explain why that's called dollars in the classroom, even though it shows administration and food service and transportation?
Absolutely, Madam President. The reason I titled it Dollars in the Classroom is because I'm trying to stay consistent with the Auditor General. So the Auditor General that puts out that pie chart and the 1 page, now 2 pages as of this year, calls it the Dollars in the Classroom Report. So because I was using that chart in those categories, I titled it Dollars in the Classroom.
Okay.
Just to try to stay consistent.
Okay. I just wouldn't want anybody to like take that one chart out of context and make it sound like we thought that those things were in the classroom. And can you talk again a little bit about the difference between the 193 million that's on the total of that chart and the 169 million that we're looking at for the budget?
Sure, absolutely, Madam President. Again, as this chart shows, this is all funds, and I will put a little caveat. There's about 2 funds that aren't counted in here. That's capital and some 900 funds, which are an IGA. But this is basically all funds. So the $170 million is our M&O, our district additional assistance, and our federal grants. But when the Auditor General does their pie chart, as I call it, and their dollars in the classroom, they use all those other funds. So they use state grants, they use food service, obviously, as we saw, and they use all those 500 auxiliary funds that we have. Lost textbook fees, extracurricular. So there's a lot more funds and budgeted dollars in this box here than there is on that summary page that I just showed, which shows up on page 1 of the budget. So it's 3 pots of dollars versus about 30 or 40 pots of dollars.
Okay. And tax credit?
Yes, extracurricular tax credit is in there, yes.
And I think I just wanted to take just a couple minutes to briefly explain the percentage of dollars in the classroom, how that's determined.
Okay, sure, Madam President. So The percentage.
And I should clarify, in the Auditor General's annual report.
Sure. So in this report, you can see that we have 55% in the classroom. That's what we've budgeted right now. So what the Auditor General does is they use what they call the function code, which is what we call 1,000. And so the Auditor General just takes that and pulls out all of our expenses. So you can see in fiscal year 16, they took out all of our expenses that are coded to 1,000, not just M&O. So everything in extracurricular, everything in rental dollars, everything in community ed, everything in grants, everything that's coded to 1,000. And they put it all into their bucket, and then just use that as a comparison to the overall total.
Okay, so just, you know, kind of simple math. What would be the effect of, let's say, if we doubled our tax credit for extracurricular activities? What would be the effect on our classroom dollar percentage?
Madam President, that's a great question. You're gonna make me do math standing up here.
Well, no, I don't.
We get approximately $3 million right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if we doubled it, it'd be about $6 million. If we spent all of that in the classroom, that would take that 55% and probably get it to about 56.5.
Okay, but the tax credit money generally isn't spent in the classroom. It's usually extracurricular. So would that lower the overall percentage of classroom dollars if we got a lot of extracurricular money?
Madam President, yes. So extracurricular dollars we spend a lot for transportation, so they get coded to transportation. So if we did get a lot and we had a lot of travel, then if everything else stayed the same, then yeah, we might see transportation go up with a huge increase in expenditure, which yes, would potentially lower the dollars in the classroom too if everything stayed the same. So it is a little bit of doing good, but because of how we classify it, it sometimes can seem like it's hurting the dollars in the classroom when it's really not, because it's going to students.
Well, and part of the reason I bring it up is that one of our fellow districts got a very large grant for counseling and prevention, and it ended up hurting them when it came to that ratio that's determined, that determines the amount in the classroom. So I guess it's going to be a delicate balance to make sure that we maintain all the promises that we've made and still have all the opportunities we can for our kids.
Absolutely.
So, other comments, questions? Oh, Mr. Jackson, you still with us?
Good morning.
Are you still?
Yeah.
How about if we start with you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks. Yes.
I don't have any additional questions. I guess I will just make a comment that I like the additional slides. I appreciate the work Danny's done to make this presentation even better. It's a great presentation, very clear, and thank you for the additional information. It's helpful.
Mrs. Hartman.
Second. All right. Mr. Bryan, thank you for your presentation. Wow, you know, I'm an accountant and a CPA, but you bring this to a whole new level of finance talk, so really appreciate it for you really bringing us along in the process here. You've really answered our questions incrementally, at least mine. I think most of our questions incrementally over the past several months. So I don't have a lot of questions. There's just some takeaways that I'd really like to underscore that I think you identified, but I'd really like to underscore it from a community perspective. I see this directionally going in the right direction in meeting what the community is asking for us to do. What I'm seeing is from a classroom perspective, you know, whether we slice it by classroom or we call it classroom instructional and student support, we've gone up by an additional % in that area, and that takes a lot to move that needle at that point. I think, looking at my numbers here, I think it's about $15 million. The outside of the classroom, which, you know, is what we call it, but I still consider those dollars critical to the success of our students and our mission, that's decreased, despite the fact that we put the number was, I think, 6, right, APs and 1 additional principal. So once again, I think we're moving that in the right direction. What I think is pretty extraordinary as a community is the way we've worked around the M&O override, and something that President Snead actually identified was that delta, that difference between the base 169 million and the 193 million. One way to characterize this, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong, to me that's really entrepreneurial and community efforts. So whether we call that school tax credit, or we call it community ed, or we get really creative in our food services, we are finding ways to find money to put directly back to our students to the tune of $23 million, and that's what's making a big difference in getting us to an A district. And last, it was on one of the slides, but I just want to underscore it. The fact that our investment per student, and I know we call it ADM and all those kinds of things, but bottom line, it's the number of dollars in our budget divided by our total number of students has increased 14%. And that does not come lightly, because that really, the majority of that is related to our community saying, yes, we want to invest in our students, and yes, we're prepared to do that. And sure enough, in our budget, we're well over 90% delivering on that commitment. So I just want to underscore those themes for the community, and thank you for your effort in pulling us through this process.
Oh, thank you.
Other board members? Mrs. Perleberg.
Thank you very much, and thank you for meeting me last week, and Dr. Peterson as well for going through all these numbers. I agree with so much that's been said today. We've gone over a lot of numbers in the last few months, and I know we have a lot of stakeholders that tried to do the same. And the efforts to wrap our heads around this and explain it, and administration to explain these dollars, that it's difficult and time-consuming, and it's valuable and important, and we're grateful for it. I'm grateful for everything that this budget is bringing to our schools, our APs, all about our APs. And yes, it's called administration, but I think every parent, when asked that question, is it valuable on that campus, we'd say, yes, it's worth the cost. Many other things in this budget are worth the cost. Specials all day, all of it, fantastic. And I've tried really, really hard. And my last vote at the last meeting, putting this out, I tried very hard to focus on the numbers and trying to understand them, and just kept feeling like I at some point will see what, as a board member, I'm really wanting to see. And while I have all the respect in the world for our budget committee and our administration that works so hard to give this district what it needs to be successful, and the work and thoughtful deliberation that it takes to judge what's needed, what can we live with, what can we live without. It's not easy. We've been doing it, at least myself, for 2 years. All of us have been doing it for 2 years. It's not easy, and it just keeps getting harder and harder. But I kept feeling it for a long time that I'm going to see it in the numbers. If I can just get it proof in the numbers. I absolutely want to respect the budget committee and administration. I want to respect this budget very much. So what's my problem? And my problem is the same thing that's kind of been my problem for a long time, and that's my board member lens. I don't have the luxury of having a lens of a committee member, budget committee member. I don't have the luxury of even the lens of someone at our sites trying to get to our students what they need. I feel so strongly that our board is supposed to have a different lens, and that is the future of SUSD and the direction of SUSD. And as most of you in this room can attest, I've made a lot of statements regarding that direction and my confusion as to what SUSD looks like in the future, and our identity, and what we value, and what are our priorities.
And especially as we look at a budget, what are the absolute priorities for getting to where we want to be in the future? I'm just not there, and that's just the plain fact reality. I'm just not there as a board member. I don't feel we are there as a board, and that's not a reflection on work. That's not a reflection on numbers. That's not a reflection on any individuals. But for me as a board member to look out to my stakeholders, our stakeholders rather, and my community members that I have to look into their eyes and say, we know where we're going, and we are sure that we are spending every precious dollar to get there. That's just where I am. I can't do that at this time. But I do appreciate all the hard work. I love this district, and my vote today reflects more of purely where I am as a board member and the lens that I feel we have unfortunately not looked at this budget through. Hope that makes sense. So thank you all for your patience and for your dedication to SUSD.
Mrs. Kirby.
Okay, Mr. O'Brien, thank you for your presentation tonight, this afternoon, and also thank you for meeting with me and Board Member Hartman last week and Dr. Peterson. After my last vote on the budget, I did reach out to Dr. Peterson to try to find some common ground on what could earn a yes vote for me, and we had that meeting. You know, I saw the slides, the additional slides for the first time. I think it was Thursday or Friday of last week, maybe Thursday. And while the slides look like what I had shared with you that would help strengthen my understanding of this budget, it didn't have the content that I shared with you. And the best way that I can articulate it is the content that I was looking for was to demonstrate how we're investing our budget. And I use the word invest deliberately because these are tax dollars that are given to us by our community to invest in their school system. These are not our dollars. But rather, what I think these slides show are more of a source of revenue. Here's where the revenue's coming from. This is coming from grants, this is Classroom Site Fund, this is DAA, this is transport. But it doesn't take that extra step and say, and this is how we're going to spend and invest your money next year. So it's still missing that for me. And that's what I need to be able to stand up in front of a community and share with them what their administration and their board is doing on their behalf. Now, there are some pieces that I will be able to. For example, we all know about the APs and the specials. Those are very tangible. We can see them. And I, too, I don't forget who said it, I'm very grateful that our community shared their tax dollars with us that will allow us to do that and that we are following through on that commitment. However, you know, also a CPA and a financial analyst, you know, I do also see the numbers going in the right direction. We are increasing our dollars in the classroom, and that's a broadly defined classroom being actual instructional support and student support and classroom. But yet, we're not increasing them enough, in my opinion. Even with the increase that you showed today, we're still behind Mesa, Chandler, Gilbert, Paradise Valley, Peoria, Deer Valley, and Dysart from 2 years ago. And so yes, we're moving the needle in the right direction. I think there is probably, although I can't see it in the budget, a missed opportunity to move it further. You know, at the end of the day, we have a $16.7 million increase in our budget next year from what we spent this year. Just think about that for a minute, $16.7 million. We should be screaming from the mountaintops of how we're investing in our front line in our classrooms, in our programs, in our teachers. But yet, we're not. And I'm perplexed as why we aren't. I can't answer the question, well, where is all that money going? I can answer where some of it's going, APs, specials, but that falls well short of the 16.7 million. So as we hopefully continue to work on budgets together in the future and we refine this process, I would encourage you to show the community where we're investing their dollars as opposed to just telling them. And it's somewhat akin to an analogy of a student on a math test just writing down the answer versus showing his work of how he got to that answer. What I'm missing is showing me the work of how you got to that answer. Because then it's defensible, it's credible, and I can stand up and deliver it and put my name to it with the utmost confidence. So, again, I am grateful for the effort. I'm grateful for your time, all of you. I said this last time, the broader you, because a budget is not built by one individual in an organization by himself. It takes a part of every piece of the organization to contribute to that budget. I recognize that. I am grateful for the investments we are making, specials, APs, 2% increase, band and strings, but I'm worried. I'm worried also about our high school class sizes. I'm worried about cutting our front office staff at the sites. I'm worried about other cuts the sites are taking that may seem minuscule at this time, but you never know what that's going to materialize into, and that's things like landscaping and janitorial services. So, you know, it's progress, and I'm grateful for that, and I thank you for that. It's just falls short for me.
Mr. Jackson, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll be real brief. I just want to say I think this budget's, I certainly understand Board Member Perlberg and Board Member Kirby's comments, but I think this budget's something. It's a celebration, in my opinion, and something I agree with Board Member Kirby. We should be screaming to the mountaintops about how we're spending this money, but, you know, we are moving the needle in the right direction, I think, in a very meaningful way. And we are honoring the commitment we made to our community with the money spent in the classroom at 89%. That's incredible, in my opinion. Anyway, I think I'm very proud of this budget, and I'm very pleased, and I'm like other board members, I'm grateful to the community for providing the support with the override to allow us to do these things and increase class sizes and adding APs and specials, all of that. That's meaningful and important. Anyway, I'm very proud of this budget, and I guess that's my comments. Thank you.
I guess part of it, I think, too, is we've become accustomed to explaining the budget based on the Auditor General. And on that yearly report, it's almost become a Bible in some areas, and I think part of it is when we are going to scream from the mountaintops, what we need to be screaming about is our service. Some of the peer districts that Ms. Kirby talked about have had the luxury of passing their overrides without having 2 years without, having to go 2 years without, which gives us a definite disadvantage, and we have some catching up to do in that arena. But what the budget and the dollars, the focus on dollars, doesn't show is the quality of service. And if we're going to scream something, I think it should be, it's about our efficiency. And it's one of the most, it's almost like the calendar. I mean, you have a certain number of days that you have to have. And when you factor in all the different factors, holidays and how many we have to do, there isn't much wiggle room. I mean, we can play with, and I'm not going to go off the agenda, we can play with a few days and that's about it. With this budget, I felt like it was pretty much the same way. The operational budget, with the things that we promised the community, the things that we have to do statutorily, the regulations, the special ed things that have to be done, IDEA things that have to be done, the ESEA things that have to be done. There's only so much wiggle room left. And one of the things I think people forget about is, in addition to having 2 years with no override, at the same time, we've had more accountability than we've ever had before. And accountability costs money. We were told we had to be more accountable. We were told that we have to mandatorily do testing. We were told that we have to do evaluations. And teachers, classroom teachers, can't evaluate each other. That's an administrative expense. And so that all of that expense for the accountability was pushed out of the classroom. And I think sometimes that story doesn't get told. I really want to thank our community because knowing some of our peer districts are really in dire straits right now. If they don't have any growth dollars and they don't have override dollars, they don't know what they're going to do, especially with the cut in district additional assistance on top of all that. So I really want to thank our community for affording us the opportunity to continue to focus on our service. Service to our community, service to our kids. And I really want to thank the Budget Committee. Like the Calendar Committee, they're never fun. It takes a lot of dedication. Not all districts are privileged to have such a great cross-section of basically advocates. It's a room full of advocates that come in with their own lens, and they have divergent interests, and they spend a lot of time and dedicate a lot of time and effort to a thoughtful approach on a very, very difficult topic. So I really do want to thank them for all of their time and effort. It's not the most fun place to be, and I'm sure it's not the same likewise for you. So I see, I don't know who was first, but Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on two comments you made, President Sneed, you hit on two important pieces, I think, that I'm hopeful that we can continue the discussion when we come back in the fall, regardless of what happens here this afternoon with the budget. You talked about wiggle room and how much wiggle room we don't have. I asked the question a different way. How much wiggle room do we have? We have $16.7 million incremental dollars to our budget. We know that override delivered approximately $7 million of incremental dollars. So where's the other 9? And let's have the discussion about where those dollars are earmarked, budgeted for, and what wiggle room is there so that we can, and I'm going to go to the second point you made, President Sneed. You talked about catching up to do, so that we can have a dialogue about where do we need to catch up and how much money do we have to catch up with. And I think Board Member Perleberg hit on it when she mentioned priorities and wanting to know what our priorities are. I know what my priorities are. I think I'm an open book. And I'm sure we all have similar priorities and different priorities. But if we could have that discussion in the fall to get some alignment on that, and then build a wish list, as I like to refer to it affectionately, with a price tag on it, and then at the same time we're looking at how much wiggle room we have in our budget, maybe we can start chipping away at those priorities, and in a perfect world, maybe we can even start chipping away next year. So I just wanted to add that as to, and I'll remind again at the end when we do future agenda, but that is, having those two discussions, I think, will catapult us forward in moving SUSD along as compared with our peer districts. Thanks.
Dr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and our public. I think there's a couple things that we need to make sure we keep in perspective. And first and foremost, we are approving a budget that is prescriptive. We can't deviate from it. It's very prescriptive. It tells us by ADM, this is how much we get, this is how much we can add because our voters passed an override, this is what we add for desegregation dollars. That's what we're passing. That's different than what, and I agree, we have to talk about our priorities for expenditures. So what we are passing as a budget is very prescriptive, that the state legislature says, here's what you're getting dollars per student, here's your weighted count, here's what you're getting for transportation for your route miles. You put all that together and that's all you get. That's what we're adopting. We're adopting something very prescriptive from the legislature, and unfortunately, as Danny said, it takes all of these to come up with 3 line items for our budget, so all the worksheets. Very prescriptive. That's what we're adopting. And then we talk about what are our priorities for expenditures. And we need to understand that, yes, we are looking at that $16.47 million increase that Mrs. Kirby talked about. And of that, we've shared multiple times that the fiscal year 16 M&O override actual budget that the override is paying for is $1.8 million in specials, $260,000 in band and strings, $4.1 million in reducing class sizes, $583,000 in horizontal pay, $2.2 million in salary increases, $1.5 million in the health insurance differential, department chair supplementals of $117,000, assistant principals, $552,000, and a new additional principal, $93,000, for a total of $11.3 million of new money of that 16.7. So yes, we still owe you to show you that additional $5 million. We're committed to doing that. It's going to take a little more time. When we come back in August, we will do that and we will show that. But the override dollars of $11.3 million of additional money is funding 114.5 FTE of additional teachers. It's funding 7 FTE of assistant principals and 1 FTE of a principal. So we have 122 new FTE positions from the override on top of everything else we're doing. We've had those in presentations, and I just wanted to share it here to show that we do have priorities, and our priorities are our children, they're our classrooms, and that's where that $11.3 million is gone. The additional $5 million, some of it is dollars that, frankly, our hands are tied, because it is the grants that when the federal government has their fiscal year from 1 October to 30 September, and our fiscal year is 1 July to 30 June, their fiscal year is 25% still underway when our fiscal year ends and the new one starts. So some of those additional dollars is that additional 25% of the year that we still have to pay for, because it doesn't line up with our fiscal year. And so that causes a little bit of that disruption. We need to make sure we clarify that, and we will do that. So when you come back in August, you will see that. We do add some additional dollars for MIPS, for Medicare. I'm proud to say that our special ed staff did a great job of tracking that. Those dollars right now are a couple $100,000. We're looking at, frankly, for transportation fuel, because fuel has gone up. We were probably 40, 50 cents a gallon. It's gone up, and we're trying to see, how do you gauge that? Because if we aren't careful, we have to buy gas at the end of the year. If we run out of fuel money, we got to go figure out where are we going to take money from to try to do it. Are we going to stop buying paper for kids? Are we going to raise the temperature of the classroom because our utility bill then will go down because we're not going to have as cool a classroom? Makes an uncomfortable classroom, but that gives us the dollars to pay for the fuel that we have to transport students. We also work very hard to make our transportation department efficient, and if you notice, we spend less money than what we actually get from the state of Arizona in the transportation formula. I think that's commendable. Can we do better? Absolutely. Can we do better in every single place? Absolutely. We're committed to that. But it's going to take us a little bit of time. But I wanted to emphasize that of that large increase, $11.3 million is spoken for with the override, and we've committed those dollars where we said we're going to commit them, and they're targeted directly to students and sites. And I think that's important to make sure that we understand that. And the budget we're asking to have passed is a very prescriptive budget, and then we have to talk about the expenditures, because that's really the key, not the budget itself, because the budget, the state says, here's what you get, and we get what we get, and that's just what it is.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson, for correcting me. I was doing the mental math in my head, and I had the numbers transposed. The override was 18 million. I said 7 million. I understood it was really 11 million, as you stated. I just got the numbers mixed up, so thanks for that. And I'm going to respectfully disagree that our role here today is simply to approve the prescriptive math. Our role here today is to prove the meaning behind the math. And the way I know that is because we have been asked to address dollars in the classroom, and the only way you can address dollars in the classroom is to understand where the dollars are going. So we'll just agree to disagree on that, I guess, but again, thank you for correcting me on the 11 million versus the 7.
Mr. Jackson, do you have anything to add?
Not at this time, no, thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I would like to, somebody want to make a motion to adopt the budget? Ms. Hartman.
I will make a motion to adopt the proposed 2015-16 budget.
Yes, submitted.
I'll second that.
Okay, Ms. Hartman made motion, Mr. Jackson second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 And those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2.
Thank you.
Make a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Did you make it, or are you looking
I'm
for one?
making a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. Okay, we will call to order our regular meeting. And first is approval of the agenda. Yeah.
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Mrs. Hartman, did you second?
I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is student and staff recognition and celebrations.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and our public. Just a couple of superintendent's comments this afternoon. First, I'd like to recognize the City of Scottsdale and its partnership and dedication to keeping our students safe. The City of Scottsdale City Council unanimously approved an amendment to our intergovernmental agreement with the Scottsdale Police Department to continue to provide resource officers at the middle school level. The approved amendment allows us to maintain our current staffing levels for resource officers, and we're very appreciative of the city for giving us that unanimous approval. Next, our SUSD website, where we have launched a new and improved website. We did it in advance of the holiday weekend to try to ensure a smooth transition, so we've been running 2 websites for the last week or so. The new site can be found at the same address, www.susd.org. It is user-friendly. It's more responsive for computers and mobile users. There's a new feature, a tour schedule for prospective students and families, and we've already had families signing up to actually take tours already, even though we have been running dual programs. Interested tours, you can register at your school websites, and a staff member will reach out to schedule it. The visitors can find photos of students and staff links to follow numerous social media sites. We also have new web banners for our schools, special pages for families, celebrations and school events. And our Scottsdale Online Learning has a page. And we will be working to have the total school fusion page that we know and we've had for years totally go away as of July 1. So anyone that will be moving to the new website, please make sure you clear your browser history, because if you don't, you will end up in a loop trying to find the old website. So we want to just make sure we get that verbiage out there to folks. We had some people this week that did it. They cleared their website and were able to be okay. And then finally, as we near the 4th of July, Scottsdale Schools would like to remember and celebrate the true meaning of Independence Day. This national holiday commemorates the birth date of our nation, and it marks the day our founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. It's a time when we remember the men and women who have sacrificed to give us freedom. While we hope you all enjoy the many celebrations and activities on this day, we hope you also take time to recognize what it is to live in a democratic society and what it means to be free. Scottsdale Schools would like to honor our forefathers and thank our every brave man and woman who has served and those who continue to serve to defend that freedom. Have a safe and happy Independence Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Next item on the agenda is public comment. I have one card, and it was Patrick Hallinan. And did he leave? Okay.
That's the public comment I was still expecting.
So we'll move on to item 10, superintendent's comments.
Those were it.
That was it? Okay. Next item is consent agenda. I would like to pull item 9H for discussion and reconsideration. Anything else from board members? We good? Okay. Can I have a motion then to approve the consent agenda, item 11H?
11H?
Yeah.
So moved?
Seconded?
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay.
What item is that?
Passes 5-0. And I pulled item H, which is approval of the delegate and alternate to the Arizona School Boards Association, the ASBA Delegate Assembly on September 12th, 2015. We pulled it because we actually do have to vote on that, and it has to be in our minutes, and we have to then give the submission to ASBA. And after our last meeting, when we talked about it, it was Ms. Perleberg indicated her desire to...
I won the arm wrestling contest. Yeah.
desire to be alternate, and I am going to, if you would like to be the delegate, I would...
Oh, no, I don't want to arm wrestle you for that.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So I would like to, okay. I would like to recommend that the governing board approve Bonnie Sneed, governing board president, as a delegate to the Arizona School Board Association, delegate assembly on September 12th, 2015, and recommend that the governing board approve Barbara Perleberg as a second alternate to the delegate assembly, and as the alternate to the delegate assembly, and Kim Hartman as the second alternate to the delegate assembly. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you, George. Motion passes 5-0. And thank you for offering to do that. Next item on the agenda is item 12, information discussion, item A, report on purchase of land and real property located at 7575 East Main Street, Scottsdale, Arizona.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Madam Chairman, governing board members, Dr. Peterson, and Lisa. Today I have information that I would like to share with you related to due diligence findings and investigations at the property at 7575 East Main Street. And before I go into slides, I'd like to thank the many teams that assisted me in this activity, namely the building services trades teams and the informational services trades teams. There were numerous people who were working on this project. To update the objective of moving the educational functions, I wanted to show the relationship in a graphic format of the I guess, the achievements by way of relocation. Currently, the education center over at 44th Street is in the city of Phoenix, and we all know it's on the far west boundary of the district. 7575 East Main Street is located in central Scottsdale, approximately the apex of three learning communities: the Saguaro community, the Arcadia community, and the Coronado learning community. The building at 44th Street is approximately 36,000 square feet. The building at 7575 East Main is 12,451 square feet. It's 1/3 the size. If you're not familiar with the site, this is an overview of the site from an aerial view. North on a graphic of this nature is up, so the top of the screen is the north, which is Main Street. So you can see that Main Street, the curb line of the building is along Main Street. It's a long property, a long narrow property, but it has substantial curbside. The building itself is in a courtyard concept, and you can see that courtyard from this view. The south, which would be more towards the bottom of the screen, is an alleyway. To the right, which would be east, is a parking area, and to the left, which would be west, is a smaller parking area. There's you can see there, a long white rectangular area just south of the building that is covered parking, etc., along the alley. And you can see that from this view that there's multiple trees and things of that nature. Over on the east parking, there's an ADA parking area, which leads to the front of the building. There are statistics related to the site, in that overall the site at 7575 East Main is 42,000 square feet, which constitutes a coverage of approximately 30%. Zoning is SR, which is residential services, parking 51 spaces, 4 ADA spaces, alley access, and mature landscape, as we've just seen. And we've talked about the building size. We don't have an exact date, but we believe approximately 1976 was the original construction. It's been remodeled by the city of Scottsdale recently. It is a one-story building. It was used administratively. Our intent is to occupy administratively, which is favorable. We've talked about the courtyard concept. It is ADA compliant. We have low slope roofing, and there is an HVA system, which is a rooftop system, a 16 SEER system. It's high efficiency. If you haven't driven by, this is the entry view. And you can see, looking into the courtyard, the main entry in this view would be to the right. That was originally the main entry. It is continue. We'll use the main entry there to the right. You can also see that there is a security fence. It's a substantial security fence, and some trees and the view along the curb line. Likewise, for the street view, this is a view looking to the east, and so you can tell that the building is masonry. In that era, a slump block was popular. Actually, it's a premium block now to buy slump block, but in that era, it was very popular. And mansard mission tile, and trees are quite large. They need some work, but we have the team to trim them. So, what's the protocol for due diligence? First of all, when we started our due diligence process, we started with testing the interior materials just to ascertain whether or not they had asbestos. And so we commissioned an asbestos EPA NESHAP report, and we took over 300 samples because it was rumored, and we knew that originally we had a report that there was asbestos inside. There is none. It's been totally abated. There is none, which is very, very favorable. That's a really good thing. From that point then, we elected to begin to ascertain spatially, can we fit? And so I began working with Dr. Peterson and some outside assistants to begin to look at the spatial relationships of the existing workers, particularly the support staff workers in the education center, to focus on their needs in their workstations and their work environments. Knowing that this building in the courtyard concept actually has 3 buildings in total. There's to the left again is west. There is a building there. To the south is another independent building, and to the east there's a building that mirrors the western building. And so this facility, being 12,451 square feet, actually does accommodate all of the staff members who now work at the 44th Street Education Center. We fit everyone, and we can park everyone. It's snug, but we fit everyone. And so through our spatial planning, we also took the spring break and we went through the education center and we measured every piece of furniture in that space, and we began to use that information to begin to design work concepts. This is about the 5th generation in workspaces. And so as you'll see the different layout of spatial use, it has moved around quite often because there are existing partitions inside the building. And our goal was to use every partition that worked for us. We wanted to be as sustainable and as efficient as possible. So it works naturally to use the HR function over in the western entry, because that's the main entry. There's a very nice reception desk over in that entry. There's the security entry, et cetera. And so we elected to put the human resources over along that wall. We are using existing offices. There are 3 or 4 existing offices there. That area has a larger open office area. And as well as you'll see over in the left lower corner, City of Scottsdale had left a fairly large space there with tracks on the floor for a high density filing system. There were 2 of them, et cetera. And so we tried to keep that feature simply because it's useful to us. And then over in the south building, you can see highlighted by blue that we work very diligently to use spaces such as break rooms, things of that nature, without trying to recreate that, but assigning our support staff in benefits, payrolls, finance, et cetera, in that space. That south building has quite a few partitions and offices that were very small, and so we need to renovate that area quite extensively to make the partitions work for us. The superintendent's area, the workspace there, fit well there, as well as by use of the partitions, it just fit in that area the best. Across the courtyard, the training room is existing, and that is a space that we obviously will use quite extensively for orientations and other work opportunities. And then back around the western part of the building, the legal workspaces, the public information spaces, and the administration spaces, again trying to maximize the use of existing facilities. One of the things that we found once we were inside the building is that the finishes, the existing finishes inside the building, are very fair. They're not good, they're fair. In some places, maybe even poor. And so the notion is that we to upgrade the finishes interior as well as the lighting. The lighting is fair. It's not the best lighting, et cetera. And so most of the interior would be in the work that we would propose to pursue would be all new finishes in the interior, refinish paint the partitions, and new lighting systems, ceiling panels, things of that nature, to make a bright, fresh, professional, and a wonderful place to work. So having that work accomplished, we begin to look at the outside of the building and assess its condition. Obviously, this is a roof view. The SUSD HVAC team went up on the roof and started each air conditioner. There are 18 of them. They are 16 SEER high efficiency units. They all started and they all functioned. 2 of them need a little repair. The roof, as you can see, is in pretty good shape, and the drains are clear, and so there are no real issues that I can find and or that the building presents as far as water intrusions or anything of that nature. This is a view of the courtyard once you're inside, and you can tell that there's a mature landscaping. The large structure there that you see in the center of the slide is a former fountain that has been filled in, and in the future, it would be nice to be able to take that feature out and actually improve this as a plaza area for the staff members, so that patio shade, that sort of thing, so a place to sit and eat, relax. But that's far in the future. We can deal with that now. This building, as a courtyard building, does not circulate on the interior. It circulates on the exterior. So people move back and forth from area to area on the exterior. The security system is quite substantial, and so we'll leave that until later. The alley view, this is along the south. You can see the covered parking there. The asphalt actually is in quite good shape. You'll find some cracking and checking or alligating, but again, it's functional. It's something that we do not need to pursue right away. West parking, there's some needs to do some tree management, and but again, that's further in the future, which brings us to a base budget. So being able to look at the building objectively without prejudice, holistically, I recruited 4 reputable contractors, 1 GPA contractors, and wrote a very specific scope of work based upon what we have just talked about, so that they could give me a competitive point of view related to interior renovations. That's at the top, and you can see that they're all fairly responsible and close in price, the lowest being submitted at $367,000, $368,000. Knowing that within our procurement capabilities, we can procure systems such as low voltage systems, and or even do some of the work ourselves, because we have teams that are capable of doing that work. I listed several items that could be vendor-oriented and or self-performed. Namely, there are no low voltage systems there that are compatible with ours as a school district. And so there are no camera systems, there are no access control systems, there are no fire alarm systems, security systems, as well as advocating that there's no data and voice systems. Working with the information services groups, that would be something that we can self-perform, as well as mechanical repairs. You can see that through that procurement and self-performance, $130,000, $785,000. And within the project or project cost at the top, there's a small contingency, so the contingency line is zeroed out, et cetera. That makes a total of nearly $500,000. And one of the questions you will have is that a good value? Yes. The answer is yes. In that, given the fact that this building, 7575, is 12,000 square feet at $500,000, that's $40 a square foot to have a totally interior renovated building with professional finishes and capable to accommodate workers in a nice environment. So that is a real budget, real-time budget. These numbers just came to us last week. So in conclusion, I recommend that we as a district pursue finalizing the purchase agreement based upon 3 things. Number one is that it is a financial advantage to pursue this building. One, because it's inexpensive to renovate. When Mr. Daniel Worth presented to the Scottsdale Chamber, or Council, I should say, he mentioned to the council that the exchange of land, this parcel that's just down the street here on Main, is basically a purchase price for the district for the cost of land only. That's the market value. We get the bonus of the building, the envelope itself, because our trade for the Apache site to the 7575 is basically the same. So, and the building, we get the building as well. And so that is an advantage to us. There's also an announcement that there's some very exciting development plan just to the north of us with condos and different mercantile development. So it's a very good place to move to. Secondly, we can be facilitated in this building because it meets our objective in that we want to come back to the city of Scottsdale here. And 3 is that it reduces our administrative footprint. Upon moving back into this building, we have a very high administrative occupancy rate or utilization rate in our administration facilities. And so there are 3 prongs that really favor moving forward from that. And so I'll pause with that and allow you to ask questions.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you for your presentation. This may be more of a Michelle question, I'm not sure, but we'll start here. Just can you clarify for me, when we purchased, I mean, we approved not too long ago the transaction, but now you're recommending that we finalize. What is the legal distinction?
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. As we discussed in previous discussions about this transaction, the purchase side of the transaction of the HR building, we made sure to put in that contract an ability for the district to cancel the purchase if we had any reason whatsoever that we wanted to get out. That due diligence period is right now, and it expires on July 7th. So we wanted to come back to you to make sure that you were comfortable with what we found, what figures we're looking at, and that kind of thing, so that we could make sure you're still good with us moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Now it's all coming back to me. Okay, so that segues then into my next question, and I can go back and through the videos and look, but I remember one of us asked what the total cost would be for remodel, for lack of a better word, after we purchased the building. And for some reason, the figure 300,000 was the estimate that's in my head. Am I remembering that correctly, or am I off?
You are. The reason why you'll find these numbers higher is, one, is that at that point in time, before we were able to really move into the building to look at it closely, there was an assumption that we didn't need to upgrade lighting or that we didn't need to upgrade finishes, et cetera. And so upon finding these items within the due diligence and just working with some of the changes that we need to deal with, you're going to find that the prices have moved up a little bit. So yes, you'll also see that the reality is that there is some market escalation because that $300,000 was projected a year ago, and so there are some costs going up. But the real key is in the cost of the partitions, the floor finishes, the total renovation on the interior. Okay,
so I'm sorry. I can buy cost escalation over time, right, but that's a 60% increase. I mean, 300,000 to 500,000 is significant. You know, 500,000 for a 12,000 square foot building to put in new carpet, new paint, new lighting, $500,000 seems incredibly excessive. And as I've just been buying my own houses and remodeling them, it's just, and I don't know if it's the government procurement process that drives that excessiveness. I think part of it is that, quite frankly, but I don't know. The facts have seemed to change quite a bit for me. 300,000 to 500,000 is a big leap. And remind me, where are these dollars coming from? What fund again?
The fund to support these are the remaining bond dollars. That's where.
And how many remaining bond dollars in total do we have?
I knew you would ask, and so I looked. So the remaining that we have to spend today is $514,000.
And the price tag on this is
I'll go back.
$498. So it eats up.
Yeah. Right. And you should also remember is that in context of your comment about $300,000, that may have not included buying additional services or systems such as camera systems, access systems, things of that nature. And so being able to look at, well, what was left behind internally, okay, et cetera.
So then maybe, and thank you for just allowing this dialogue to continue, maybe there's a list of nice to haves and need to haves. So a need to have would be, for example, new carpet, because you wouldn't want to bring all that furniture in and then in 2 years have to replace the carpet.
Right.
But the nice to haves might be some of the other systems that you referred to. And, you know, I just, when does that $514,000 run out?
We asked that question, and we asked for a formal interpretation, and within that formal interpretation is that those bond dollars are available to us for this fiscal year and into the next, I believe. Is that correct?
Good afternoon again, Board Member Kirby. In working with bond counsel and legal counsel, the bond dollars have to be spent within what they consider a reasonable amount of time from the 3-year period that we've sold them. That 3-year period was December. We had some things go on in the spring. This will be going on in the summer and the fall. So the reasonable time fits within the federal regulations that we have for the bonds. So everybody is comfortable with us spending these dollars on this project.
It's kind of my question. I mean, do we have sites that need, and I know we get into, well, you can't that spend, for example, Saguaro High School, I know for at least the past 6 or 7 years has needed upgrades in their auditorium with their lighting. And so we're spending money here on lighting and a bunch of nice to haves. Could we not have taken some of this money and invested in our sites on their lighting? And and I don't really expect you to answer that. We're not taking any action today. It's not listed for action, so even if we were uncomfortable, there was nothing we could do about it today, correct?
We are taking action. I think we have to take action.
Board Member Kirby, I would like to see if the board wants to go in another direction, an actual action. Your previous motion that you approved was for administration to complete the transaction. So
okay.
If this discussion sounded like you wanted to go in a different direction, I would recommend we find a date and get everybody together.
Okay, well, I'll quit hogging the mic. My feedback on it is I'm very comfortable with the $300,000 and moving forward with that. Beyond that, I'd like to see us invest the remaining $200,000 and possibly our sites, and I'd like to see what their needs are to compare the two lists of investing in the administration office versus investing in our sites.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby.
Mrs. Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Worcester, for the thorough due diligence. Really appreciate it. I think I just want to reiterate to my fellow board members that we incrementally have agreed to this, so we can't really change the finish line very responsibly. We've approved 3 individual motions. One was to move forward over the past few months. One was to actually move forward with the sale of the building, which we agreed to. And past that, then we agreed to the real estate transactions themselves, which was to sell the building, purchase this, and the land swap with Apache. We agreed to that to move forward. So now we're here at the place and time where we're actually agreeing to the due diligence. So you can't really change the finish line when we've incrementally approved this going forward. I do have a question, just to maybe help clarify. So what I think I heard from I have 2 questions actually. First, from financial. What I think I heard from a financial perspective is that we are buying something for land value, which that seems like it's a pretty good deal. Then what we're putting on top of that is TI improvements, which is about $40 a square foot. I don't know the real estate market in Scottsdale, but that may be a good question as to what a comparable building would be for the physical asset of the building. What would that be per square foot?
Madam Chairman, Board Member Hartman, the cost to, quote, tenant improve typically starts for this type of building and this type of use and occupancy around $50 a square foot, and can go up depending on how extensive and how nice the finishes are. To construct this building brand new, just the way we're looking at this building, it easily starts at $150 a square foot and could go up because it is a sound envelope, if you will, that we're working with. So that's why I say it is a good value starting at $40 a square foot, because that is a number that has not been seen for some time. And even working with our builder team and others, and talking with those in the industry, they're quite impressed that we can do that at accomplish this project at $40 a square foot. And again, architecture is a series of trade-offs. So as we've talked about, perhaps there are some things that need to trade off or will trade off. And so you look at a budget and it's easier to slide downhill than work uphill often.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then, if we went out and we purchased another building, this is comparable to around $150 a square foot versus $40 a square foot. So it's like 30 cents on the dollar because of the transaction that's been negotiated with the city, correct?
That's very correct.
Okay.
Board Member Hartman, in that we have the benefit of starting with an envelope. Mm-hmm. And we have the benefit of starting with a mechanical system that is functional. And we have the benefit of having underground in place, et cetera, parking. We have all those benefits, those improvements that have been put on the site. And so that's to our use. And so consequently, to recreate that, that would be the major cost that would go along with new, if you will. So when you look at a facility of this type, it is very useful to be as sustainable as possible, and that's what we're doing, using existing partitions, not keeping what's not necessarily a value to us, but keeping what is a value to us, and working very hard at that.
Okay, thank you. So based on that feedback, I'm comfortable with the financial transaction side of that, based on those assumptions. One question on the organizational side, and I apologize, we may have discussed this in the past, but I'm interested, the fact that a good number of our leadership team, specifically the kind of the curriculum side, as well as the high school, middle school, elementary kind of leadership part of the team, they will not be in this building. They will actually be in this site, the Mojave site. Just from an organizational perspective and optimizing the team working together, how are we addressing that and getting comfortable with that?
Thank you, Madam President, Board Member Hartman. This is similar to how we've been functioning this last year. Mm-hmm. We have the staff at the MDA, the curriculum folks, and the executive directors for elementary, secondary are housed there, along with special ed, and they work well together. Most of us are out quite often already, visiting schools, in classrooms, in meetings. So we still will have that floor plan that shows the training room, the meeting room. That will still be utilized for our meetings. So you can see the training room for SLT meetings, LAT meetings. We will come together like we do. Otherwise, we communicate text, phone, email, because we are out quite a bit. The main staff, what would be there, are the staff that's currently in the Ed Center, accounts payable, payroll, the HR staff, Danny in his area over in the administration, along with Mary, the public information and marketing, they're out quite a bit. Legal, for the most part, is in the office. Michelle goes out to meetings and has some trainings, but her other staff and Cherie from risk management stay there. So pretty much operating the way we operate now. And I think it's important to realize that we've tried to be frugal on this, and so we've moved people out from the Ed Center so that we could reduce square footage to be able to be in a building like this. Dollar-wise, I think the city would tell you that if they hadn't worked with us on the Apache property, they would have sold this building for twice, the property and the building for twice what we were able to pay for it. So I think that's important. And the revitalization that we're seeing in this area, especially with that block just to the north that is being bought, they're going to tear it down and build the retail, the grocery, and then 11 condos. This is continue to go up in value, so it's a pretty good value there. And I will agree with Mrs. Kirby. Our original budget I argued with, frankly, Terry and Danny on this, because the additional costs, the two big costs are the lighting and the flooring. And I had the same thing. The lighting's about $93,000 and the flooring's $80,000, and those were the two big costs. And part of the discussion, and the rest of our leadership team had the discussion also, that we need to honor our employees. This isn't about administrators. This is about our employees that are every single day there and trying to make sure that they have a nice, comfortable working environment. It's not the Taj Mahal, but to have that, because when you go in the MDA, you go into our buildings that we've rebuilt, the middle schools, our high schools, they have a nice working environment. And so the idea that Terry and Danny convinced me was, we need to honor our regular employees that are in this building in that same vein. And so I backed down from that, but they'll tell you, I originally pitched a fit on those two items, and I had the same reaction.
Mr. Jackson? You with us?
No,
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this is this entire transaction is very positive for SUSD. Removing from an old, large, very inefficient building to a much smaller, much more efficient building, much better located for us, right in Scottsdale, and I think it does need to be. Obviously, Dr. Peterson's right. It needs to be a comfortable environment for our administrators. I trust that Terry and Dr. Peterson and Danny have used a very sharp pencil to try to come up with, what's reasonable. I agree with Bam. I wish, these costs are quite a bit higher than we were led to believe, but needs to be a comfortable, safe working environment, and this entire transaction, I think, is a very positive move for our district going forward, so I'm in favor of it.
Mrs. Perlenberg? Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. I do agree. I know in past conversations we had a lot of discussion and looked at the idea of moving onto a campus and using some of that facility, and I totally understood the downsides, the logistical issues of that. I would take a wild stab that $40 a square foot for that renovation. We probably would have been looking at a lot more if we had decided to try and go on campus. Just taking a guess there. Don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing I have no fears that you have budgeted out marble and gold fixtures or anything like that. So I agree overall. I think we have a lot of stakeholders very happy. We're back in Scottsdale. We have downsized, so to speak, and a lot of us homeowners know about that. So I agree. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add a couple little things. Upgrading the lighting, are we going to more energy efficient lighting so that we'll have some utility savings?
Oh, absolutely. That is a necessity in renovations, in interior renovations in our contemporary era. Just like the lighting in this space, it is upgraded to very low watt use.
Any idea over time how long it takes to recapture?
When you upgrade lighting approximately 20 cents per square foot, and the calculation on this building would be approximately $8,000 per year in lighting cost alone. Because electricity, when you look at the cost, is broken down into three parts. Electricity for HVAC, cooling, if you will, the plug load for computers, and then your lighting. Mm-hmm. And so within an electrical cost, that's how you look at that.
Okay. And, and I look at the other things that are on that list. I mean, the security is mandatory. We have very sensitive student records, a lot of sensitive information. So the security and cameras and that sort of thing, I think are a great investment. In my opinion, the sooner we can sell the district office, then the sooner we'll have extra money left over that we can use toward what we really need to do with some of our school sites.
Yes. Thank you.
I have one more question, and Terry, I apologize. I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Does your proposal include the rebates from the utility company for the upgraded lighting and things?
No, and that is a cost that we would
So we will
recover.
get a pretty good rebate for our lighting upgrades, and we can use that money in any of the schools. So that's the good thing about that.
Okay. Mrs. Kirby?
Thank you. Question, Doctor, is that rebate money have to sit in this capital fund, or can it go into M&O for like utility?
Danny, the utility rebate money goes in for more capital type projects. It goes into the energy and water savings account, right?
It goes into the energy and water savings account.
So it'd be capital projects.
So it stays back in this, so it would go in the same bucket that the sale of the Ed Center would go? No.
No.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to, we don't have to. I'm trying to learn.
I think it's a good question. I want to know,
Yeah,
too.
Madam President, Board Member Kirby, it doesn't go back into the bond fund. It doesn't go back to the rentals. It goes into the water and savings account, which is a separate account, and we can use those rebates at sites, not necessarily for anything. They have to be energy and water savings type projects, but we can use them for items at the sites if we need to.
But it'll free up some capital.
Mrs. Perlberg.
I can't run away, okay.
I got my light on. Can you remind me too, when the Ed Center is sold, and those dollars go into that bucket, those are dollars that we can spend on projects at our sites, is that right?
Board Member Perlberg, when the Ed Center is sold, those dollars will go into the school plant fund, which is a little bit different than water and savings. And as we've talked in previous meetings, we will use those dollars for maintenance and repairs and capital purposes, because they can't be used for M&O purposes.
Right.
At our sites.
At our sites,
Because
okay.
the ballot language said they would be
That's
applied to
right.
our schools.
Yes.
That was the recollection I had, just wanted to confirm that
Absolutely.
we will have a fund for those, yes, very necessary site.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you very much.
Well, Bonnie, can I ask a quick question?
No, yeah, of course. Of course. Go ahead, George.
David, you've probably given us this information before, but have we done an estimate on savings, efficiency savings from the old building to this new building at 7575 Main annually? An approximation, or has that been done? Cost savings, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Board Member, or President Sneed and Board Member Jackson, me sitting at my desk penciling out the fact that the Education Center is 36,000 square feet, and this building is 12,000 square feet, and knowing on the average, a education building, we expend $1.50 or more per square foot. So you can imagine that we would spend approximately $60,000 per year at the Education Center on 44th Street, and a third of that at this building. And so from that point of view, $20,000 perhaps here. So there could be an estimated savings, just very round numbers, of approximately $40,000 a year.
And that money, obviously, is coming out of the M&O budget, so that's another positive, I think. That's meaningful. So anyway, thank you, Terry.
Did you have anything you wanted to
No,
add,
I was,
Danny?
if Board Member Jackson was going to ask if it comes out of the M&O budget, I was going to answer. It does come out of the M&O budget, so it'll be savings in the M&O budget, at least for next year. Just remembering utility costs go up every year, so when it go up, sometimes some of that savings will get eaten up, but it's savings, and we're using less energy, which is important.
Well, thank you. If there's nothing further, we'll move on to the item 13. Future items, board members may propose topics for future consideration. I have the discussion on priorities, expenditure priorities. Is there, and I don't have the exhaustive list here of what we have left over from last year, but is there anything else?
I have my light on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Kirby.
Yeah, just the other piece to that that we discussed, and that's the incremental dollars in our budget beyond the M&O and where that's going.
And that would tie in with the expenditure priorities?
They can be two separate discussions, but I probably is best to have the priority discussion first. I think that's higher priority. And then we can go from there.
Okay. And shortly, you'll all be getting, as board members, you'll be getting a list of tentative topics for next year. Are there any governing board reports? Okay, hearing none. Then dates of upcoming meetings are tentatively August 6th at 10 a.m. We got requests to change to the 13th. I don't know if everyone received that. And then tentatively it was August 11th, but we wanted to change that to the 18th at 5 p.m., a regular board meeting. The August 13th meeting, if everyone's in agreement, would be at 10 a.m. And that would be at Mojave. And the 18th meeting, 5 p.m., would be here. And with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thanks, George.
You're welcome, Bonnie. Thank you.
Thanks so much for calling in. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.